It's an enormous pleasure to welcome to our podium Dr. Karni Jasol, who is the director of the Mehrangarh Museum Trust, which means that he is in charge of this great fort, begun in 1459, perched on a rock 400 feet above the vast plain of the Thar Desert, where the Rothor clan established itself as the rulers of this particular corner of the world, which they called Marwar, and their capital being Jodhpur. Karni is eminently capable of talking to you about this fort and the objects in this exhibition, almost 90% of which come from the fort, because he was born there. He grew up there, and he's worked in the museum for 14 years, and he's been director for 8 years. And what a fine director he is. When I asked some 5 years ago, Maruk Tarapur, to help us conceive an exhibition of India of the period of around 1500 to the present, and we began to travel and look for possible partners for such a project. After some wonderful voyages through India, it became clear that there was really only one possibility, and that was the Mehrangarh Museum Trust and its director, Karni Jasol. He was one of the principal architects of the exhibition, and in its late stages was the editor and the refiner. He's the principal editor of the catalog and author of the key essay that lays out the themes of the exhibition. And he knows intimately all of these objects which are on display upstairs. It's been just an enormous pleasure to work with Karni Jasol and his team at the fort on this project, now, as I said, almost 5 years. And we're so terribly proud of the project, which is visible here now, which will go on to Seattle next September, then on to Toronto in the spring, and now we think on to Prague after that. So it's an exhibition that's going to live on, perhaps not the 500 years of the fort, but it's going to have its own life and trajectory, as well it should. It is, to my mind, the most impressive and spectacular exhibition we've mounted since I've been here for 6 years, and it really ranks as one of the most exciting exhibitions I've ever seen. And so great thanks to Karni Jasol, and I'm sure you'll be as intrigued to see it as I described after you hear his lecture. Dr. Jasol.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary, for your kindness. It's been such a great pleasure working with the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. As Gary mentioned, it's been 5 years of working, and I must personally thank you for your leadership, hospitality, and friendship. And exhibitions of such scale can only be possible if there is that kind of synergy between the two teams, which are separated by oceans. And it's a long distance project coordination, which was one of the most challenging aspects of the exhibition. But we are so pleased to bring this exhibition to your wonderful city. And thank you all for coming for this lecture. I will attempt to take you through and walk you through the exhibition, bring out some of the key themes that we are exploring, and also some of the important contribution that we hope that this exhibition will be making towards understanding of Indian art. This is one of the largest exhibition of Indian art in America. The scale is quite unprecedented. The key highlights of the exhibition, from my perspective, is that it will further the appreciation for Indian art. The rich artistic tradition of India are visible throughout the exhibition in the form of objects which are so finely crafted in wood, woven in silk, forged in metal, and you will understand the depth of the skill and the craftsmanship skills of India. About 33 years before Columbus set his foot on this land, far away in India, the country was divided among many kingdoms. And in 1459, a chief decided to establish a new kingdom of his own, and the ruling clan would be called the Rathors. The kingdom is located in western India in the present state of Rajasthan. The large shaded area that you see is the former territory of the Kingdom of Marwar. Marwar literally means the arid land, and it was one of the largest kingdoms before the independence of India in terms of its area. And with its capital city in Jodhpur. Jodhpur was established by King Rav Jodha, after whom the city is named Jodhpur, literally meaning Jodha's city. It's very important to understand this building because the objects that you see in the exhibition were historically housed in this building. They were objects in use, and now they are in their new avatar displayed for public. The present Maharaja is the 37th generation who have been in this city and kingdom. And until the 19th century, late 19th century, the royal family lived in this building before they moved to a modern palace. The building was then turned by the present Maharaja into a museum in 1970s, and that's where the collections are presently housed. In my next few slides, I will attempt to interpret this building to you, because this building is very important in terms of our understanding of the exhibition. The many objects that you see have direct reference and relevance and context to this building. The fort is situated on a hill around which now the city has grown. It's a single mass of fortification built over a long period of time. So it was this present structure that you see was not constructed by the first ruler, Rav Jodha, but all subsequent rulers have added to what the founder established and has taken the present form. The building has three important principal functions. As you can see, that it's very defensive in its architecture. It was built to protect, and it has all the features of a defensive architecture. It has these massive bastions, places from where you would fire guns, arrows, a moat, a fortified city wall. So it appears and has all the quality and character of a strong citadel. The second important function of this building was that this was the seat of power. So it is from here that the king is administering his large kingdom, which means that there are several spaces in this building which are of administrative nature. Courtroom, courtyards where the king would be holding his court, stately rooms, and spaces for the ministers and the court. And the third important function was that this building was also residential. So Maharaja and his family continued to live in this building. So from the outside, it appears as this massive fortified building, but as you step in, you encounter these beautiful palaces. It is built of red sandstone, which is locally available, and very finely carved in stone. These are some of the interiors of the fort. So unlike Western art where you hang paintings, we don't have tradition of hanging anything from the palace walls. The palace walls are painted in this way. This is an 18th century period room where the king entertained his guests. But the interesting thing about Indian spaces is that we don't have a concept of furniture. Our furniture is traditionally is bolsters and cushions, which means that our spaces are very flexible. So though I say that this room is where he entertained his guests, yes, he did so, but archives also inform us that he has dined here. He has had a meal here or even a meeting in this room. The fort is literally like a small city within a city. It has gardens, temples, courtyards, and large utility grounds. This image, the green that you see towards the slide, is from the gardens. The present Maharaja is Maharaja Gatsanji. He's the 37th dynastic head of Marwar Jodhpur. His ancestors established the kingdom, and one of the important contributions that he has made is that of continuity of traditions. Here we see him in ceremonial clothes where he is participating in a formal darbar. There is no relevance of darbar in present time, nor does Indian royalty enjoy any political status, but he has been able to reinvent a role for himself, which is of relevance in the present times. The community and the clanmen are held together through the traditional festivals and events that he organizes. He became king at age 4. His father tragically died in a plane crash. His father was a pilot, and this is soon after India's independence. Before India's independence in 1947, India was divided into 500 plus small and big, what the British called princely states. And all these princely states, through a very tedious process of integration, were united to what we know of India today. His father negotiated the merger of his kingdom into the Union of India, and he wanted sort of a lot of benefits to his kingdoms in terms of whether the court buildings would come in his state or elsewhere. The next turn of event in India after independence is the first general election, and that is in 1952. His father decides to contest the elections, and he wins. He and his party, they win the election, and he would have been the first governor of the state. But he is on his way to thank people, and is in his plane that tragically crashes, leading to his anointment as the next ruler. Here you see him seated on a coronation seat, and like his ancestors, he is anointed in the same way, in the same space in the fort, which is this courtyard. That beautiful painting that you saw is in the exhibition. The opening theme of the exhibition, which you see in Cullinan Hall, is this beautiful installation of a wedding procession. The wedding procession was included in the exhibition under the theme Tradition and Continuity, sort of making a point that this kingdom is not sort of frozen in time, but is living and breathing. The family continues to play an active role, as I mentioned, in patronage of festivals and events. And a few years back, Maharaja's son marriage had the same flavor and the same sort of grandness and use of historic objects that you see in the first installation in Cullinan Hall. The wedding procession also represents some key themes that are being explored in the exhibition, which is the role of women. Some of you who have gone through the spaces would realize that there's an entire section dedicated to the role of women, which I will discuss at length when I come to that discussion. And this was the wedding in Jodhpur, where you see a similar installation or similar arrangements were made. And these are how these objects that you see in Cullinan Hall held and used. You see a reference in the painting how one of the insignias or royal standard is carried by the retainers, and how the point that I was making earlier, that all these objects were part of the court life, and they, in this exhibition space, have been grouped together to reveal the life in the court. Now we move to the first gallery in the exhibition, which introduces the visitors to the Rathors and attributes of kingship. Who is a king? What is his role? And I'm often asked, what was the source of revenue for them? You know, how were they able to build such large forts and palaces? You have to understand this as a form of governance, and this kingdom was divided into several provinces. The provinces had their province chief, and revenue was through taxes, trade routes, important trade routes passed through the kingdom. There were minerals, salt and marble, and also in the later part of their history, they were part of the Mughal Empire and participating in several campaigns, and that also resulted into the revenue for the state. Objects like this beautiful palanquin, an 18th century grand object, almost architectural in its form. It has this beautiful dome, overhanging eave, cusped arches. It's crafted in fine wood and was carried by 12 people. So 2 people on each post. And an object like this was symbol of kingship. The king, the grandeur was communicated through the use of objects like this. It was very interesting to ship this object to Houston. Luckily, I think the craftsmen, when they constructed it, were aware of the problems that one could face of transportation of such an object, that it actually comes apart in 40-odd pieces and can be assembled back. So the roof comes apart in 4 pieces, all the doors and windows come apart, but it is such a fine example of mechanical as well as wooden craftsmanship that even after so many hundreds of years, it is still able to fix itself. You will see objects grouped together in form of paintings and objects that you see in paintings are displayed along with it. A portraiture was very important language of communicating the king's power and role. Here you see one of the Maharajas of Jodhpur seated in a formal portrait, wearing a beautiful block printed or embroidered robe with his 2 weapons on the side, which are displayed alongside in the gallery. Their military role was very important. They were warriors and engaged in campaigns throughout the history. Even the present Maharaja's ancestors were very active in the First and the Second World War. One of the greatest cavalry charges that took place in the history of cavalry was in Haifa in Israel, and what was then called the Jodhpur Lancers participated in that last cavalry charge. Patronage is very important. All the objects that we see in the exhibition are because of the active patronage that the Maharajas provided. There were artistic workshops in the fort building that I showed you. There were atelier. The painters had a space where they worked. They were given material. They were given a social status. Our new archival information reveal that the artists were given villages as a revenue source. And because of this continuing active patronage, that the arts and the artistic traditions survived. Even today, India is very rich in handcrafted material, and that is one of the reason is this continuity of patronage that was provided, and those skill survived. So in this painting, you see Maharaja inspecting jewelry and sort of revealing how engaged they were in production of arts. A devotion is a very important aspect of the gallery space. Each Maharaja had their own faith. Hinduism has hundreds and thousands of gods, but different avatars and incarnations, and that resulted in production of artwork. In the gallery, you see a wonderful cradle and several group of paintings that resulted from this association of the Maharajas to their faith God. Here you see Maharaja Bhim Singh Ji offering prayers to the Hindu god Krishna. And then that resulted in production of paintings. So if Maharaja had a faith in Krishna worship, the artist for him produced several paintings revealing the life of Krishna. In 19th century, we had a Maharaja who was interested in yoga and yoga gurus. That resulted in production of thousands of paintings under the patronage of the yogic ascetics. And this is a beautiful folio from one of the manuscripts, which is dedicated towards understanding of yoga and knowing the different points in the body. As I mentioned earlier, that the kingdom was divided among different provinces, and the province's head was known as Thakur, who was responsible for maintaining the army and also collection of taxes and passing on the taxes to the state. The transfer of power was through the tradition of primogeniture. So the eldest son would ascend to the throne. Here we see sort of a symbolic transfer of power from one king to his brother. This is a beautiful painting of Maharaja Vijay Singh holding a court with his ministers and a member of the court. The paintings, I would sort of encourage you to look for details. You know, paintings are all about details. There are so many beautiful details in these paintings that you need your eyes to zoom in and zoom out. And there is a way in which these paintings are to be viewed. As I mentioned earlier, that we don't hang paintings on a wall. So these paintings were not meant to be hung on the walls. These were meant to be looked at a 45-degree angle and then were taken into the storage. And that's one of the reasons why they have survived in such amazing quality. There's a wonderful installation of turbans, bringing in the rural kingdom. The Maharajas played a very important role in social development. The welfare of the state was one of their principal role, and it was an interesting discussion how to bring that in. There was at one time discussion about bringing in a photo essay, but turban, like your hats in Texas, are a very strong tradition, and it communicates many things, and it's come out as a fantastic installation in the gallery. We move into our next gallery, which is a very important period in Indian history, the establishment of the Mughal Empire. It's an Islamic rule which was established by a conqueror from Turkey. His name was Babur. He was the descendants of the Temur. His success in India was due to introduction of gunpowder. India at that time still was using cavalry, and Babur coming with gunpowder completely changed the scenario, and right from the middle of the 16th century up to the middle of the 19th century was a long rule of the Mughals. It resulted in a beautiful syncretic culture, bringing in the nuances of the Islamic world and the Indian tradition. The great Taj Mahal, the number of monuments in India of that period are a result of this wonderful meetings of two cultures. So this, the next section of the exhibition reveals the production of arts through this interaction between the Mughals and the Rajputs. The rulers of Jodhpur first resisted the Mughal empire. They fought battles, but after some time, when they were not able to put up a formidable united force, they allied with the Mughals as military generals and as relatives. There were several marriages of Mughal emperors to Jodhpur princesses. The builder of Taj Mahal, Shah Jahan, was a son from a Jodhpur princess. So amazing artistic revelation and development takes place during this time, which we will see through. This is one of the rarest surviving Mughal tent, 17th century, called Lal Dera, or the Red Tent. It's an imperial tent which was made for the Mughal emperor. It's red velvet embroidered in gold threads. It was last displayed at the Metropolitan Museum in 80s during the India exhibition. Since then, it was not displayed back at our museum. It was put in storage, and then it was restored for this project, and it occupies the central space in the gallery. The tradition of camping and tents is very important in India, and you can imagine, because they are continuously on movement, or they are either on war campaigns, or they are for the purpose of administration of the state, moving from one place to another. So tent making became such an important department of the Mughals and the Jodhpur rulers that they were literally erecting temporary cities. This tent is for imperial use, but then he was traveling with his entourage, his army, which also required to be accommodated. And so there is this amazing wealth of this kind of material. And this is one rare surviving example from this period. It has three important structures. This is the roof, which is in a single piece. Then it has arches, which run on the sides. And then it has a rear single piece wall. Look at the fine quality of gold thread embroidery. We have a very important loan in the exhibition from the Windsor Castle. There are 5 paintings from the Pachanama manuscript, which is the chronicle of Shah Jahan. And the reason why they are in the show is they visually depict the rulers of Jodhpur within a very close circle of the emperor. Here we Maharaja Gat Singh first, is in the painting among the top rulers. But you see how tents and tent canopies were used even as extension of architecture. Apart from their camping and outdoor use, there was also very interesting use along with the architecture. They almost extended the architectural spaces. This is Maharaja Kat Singh first, who is in the painting. This relationship also resulted in a tradition which is called khillat, or gift giving. The emperor and the Maharajas are exchanging gifts, and there are numerous archival information of the kind of gifts that they were exchanging. And one of the most popular item of gift was a turban ornament, in Hindi called sarpej. And since turbans are such an important aspect of the tradition, they symbolize identity, and for instance, exchanging of turban was considered to be an act of friendship, and thus a turban ornament was considered to be one of the highest gift status. Along with turban ornaments, we get references of weapons, like the one on the left, which is called a qatar, as a gift. These two objects are from the Al-Sabah collection. This is a beautiful painted glass hookah bowl, which His Highness, during his conversation with Gary a few days back, mentioned how it was discovered. So one very good thing about exhibitions is that objects get researched. You discover new aspects. This object was in one of the strong rooms of the Maharaja, and he mentioned to Gary that he had forgotten about it. And so he's been very generous. I mean, he literally opened up his reserves. I had access to his personal collection, and in one of my searches, my eyes, it was wrapped and kept in a strong room, and this is one of the fine examples of enamel painted hookah base. From this gallery, we move on to the next beautiful, beautiful immersive space, which is the world of women and queens. The women and this aspect of their life is less understood. They did not come in public eye, and there are very less paintings surviving suggesting their way of life. They lived in an area, a physical area, which is called Zanana, which means the queen's palaces. So the fort image that you saw in the beginning has two distinct physical complexes, buildings. One which the king used for himself and his administrative duties, and there's a separate block of building within the fort which is called the Zanana, or the queen's palaces. And so very little was known about their life. The recent archival studies have shown the important role that they played in the court life. We now know that as they came into the family after their wedding, a part of the territory was assigned to the queen. So she was financially independent. She had her own set of administrative staff, revenue collectors, lawyers, etc., etc. And it is from this income that she was able to not only have a disposable income of her own, but she was able to construct several philanthropic projects. Several lakes and water tanks in Jodhpur were built by the queens. We also now know from the archives, and especially paintings of 19th century Maharaja Takht Singh, that how they were participating in activities like hunts, polo. There are beautiful 2 paintings in the show showing women playing polo with the king. And there's this amazing painting of queens traveling on camel, each one having a rifle in her hand, going for a hunting expeditions. So these are new revelations and new discoveries that one is finding, and which are presented in this exhibition. This beautiful painting that you see on the slide is actually one of the rare paintings of women holding a court, and it's from the 19th century. This is the physical space in Jodhpur, which is called Zanana, and as you can see, it has this beautiful stone screens from where you can look out, but no one could look in. These were heavily guarded places, and there were eunuch guards who were in charge of the security, and beautiful exteriors and interiors. Yeah, that's a detail from the jali, and there are 2 jalis on display in the exhibition. Here is a painting where you see how the queens are participating with the king in an activity, but they're behind the jali there. Then you have a beautiful pavilion in the center of the gallery space, which was used by the queens in garden settings. They were participating in a number of leisure activities, especially enjoying monsoon garden events. There's a beautiful installation of royal bridal gifts, which are cosmetic boxes, a trunk. And they reveal how objects from distant areas came into Jodhpur, and how they influenced the local crafts and making. For instance, I'll give you an example. Present Maharaja's mother is from the present state of Gujarat, and she speaks a different language, and when she came to Jodhpur, she also came with her own staff members. So there were several women staff members who were part of her entourage. They all lived with her. They got married in Jodhpur, and in the royal household, you would hear the language. There would be an introduction of the cuisine from that area. Now you imagine, let's go back in time. The young princesses are growing up in this cosmopolitan environment. You have women from different parts and traditions coming, and the children growing in this environment. This is a beautiful painting of a full moon night celebration, which is even today held by the Maharaja. You see, everyone is wearing white and pink. One of the great things about the lifestyle is that there is a great sense of aesthetics and understanding of the nuances of aesthetics. For instance, why wear white? It further accentuates that when you're wearing white, it glows, and so there's no artificial light, and it would be an evening like this. I mentioned to you about this painting earlier. We now move to the next gallery, which is Jodhpur in the 18th century. Political changes are taking place in India. The Mughal Empire is on a decline. The rulers who were earlier part of the Mughal court are now reasserting themselves for a more sovereign role. There's another very interesting thing that is happening is because there is lack of patronage in Delhi now, the artists are moving from Delhi to the regional courts. And this painting is a wonderful example of that. This painting is by an artist called Dalchand. He was trained in the Mughal atelier and then moved to Jodhpur and produced some very fine quality of painting. Yeah. Look at the fineness of the treatment of the face, the costumes, the jewelry. You also see these objects. There is a peacock feather standard, which is part of the exhibition. And this one where he's enjoying a music evening. The gallery also has another beautiful tent canopy, 18th century, embroidered with silk thread. The kind of costumes that you saw in paintings are revealed through display of two beautiful robes in the gallery space. Then there is a fantastic display of arms and armor. As I shared with you earlier, that the military history is a very strong aspect of the life, which has resulted in a very strong collection of the arms and armor. There are fine examples of metallurgy and also decorations on the hilt. They are lethal weapons, but they have such fine blades and hilt decorations. Yeah. There's a wonderful display of the firearms in the form of matchlocks. And we were talking about decorations a short while back. The silver and the gold cut work. And then there's an interesting display of camel guns. These are large guns which were transported on camel as a mobile artillery. And that's the painting that I mentioned to you, where that's Maharaja Takht Singh and his female retinue. There's a very, very important group of paintings in this gallery that is based on the worship of the goddess. The goddess worship is very important to the rulers of Jodhpur and the warrior group in general. It is from her that they get their spiritual power or guidance, yes. And you would find many weapons where Durga or Devi is engraved. And this is one of the folios from the story of the goddess. And here you actually see her with multiple hands holding many weapons that you see in the gallery. From this period, we move into a very dramatic period of Indian history. This is your last gallery space, very dramatic gallery space. This is a time when the British are in India. They introduce the Indian Maharajas to Western education. There are special schools that are set up for the Indian Maharajas. They are now receiving English royalty. And the first major change that takes place is that the royal families move out of their historic homes into modern palaces, because historic homes did not lend well to modern living. and did not have the facilities of plumbing and attached facilities, etc. And the modern palace in Jodhpur is result of that major dramatic lifestyle change that is taking place. It was built by two British architects, Lancaster and Lodge. It's one of the biggest private palaces in India. Now a residence of the present Maharaja and part of it as a hotel. He was the first Maharaja to move out of the historic fort and move into a colonial style building before the big palace that I showed you was built. He is wearing, you'll see a star and an emblem of the Queen. So you know that he has just attended the Great Darbar, or the huge assembly of Indian royalty for the Queen's coronation of India. You start seeing influences in jewelry. So more Western style jewelry is now in fashion. Interestingly, the interiors of the palace were designed by a Polish artist, Stephane Noblin. He was running away from the war and came to India. He held his first exhibition in Mumbai, where he got introduced to the Maharaja's grandfather, who at that time was looking for some design interventions. And these are the Art Deco drawings that he produced, suggesting the interiors. And these rooms are exactly like this. And that's an amazing single piece marble bathroom in one of the suites, exactly the same way as he had designed. This period also resulted in new passions and new interests. Maharaja's grandfather here, Maharaja Umed Singh, the builder of the modern palace, took on aviation in a big way, and his plane is displayed in your gallery. The Indian Maharajas also became great patrons of European luxury goods. You would have all major European luxury brands, from Louis Vuitton to Cartier to Rolls-Royce, having their branches in India. And there's a huge material that was produced for Indian royalty. Here, in this case, you can see designed by a European jeweler, a headdress. A similar headdress the Maharaja's grandmother is wearing. So the traditional jewelry stones were reset into contemporary European-influenced jewelry. Yeah. So from our first slide of the elephant, we end with Silver Ghost Rolls-Royce, and that is the breadth of this exhibition. Thank you so much.